perfect.
Attend online.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Hope you saw that video. So welcome to Community Allyship, turning conversation into actions. Before we start, I just want to introduce myself. And by all means, people joining us remotely, please make sure you indicate in the chat and engage with us if you can't hear any issues. My name is George, working at the Chartered Insurance Institute. And today, joined as well by, so we have Richard, and also we have Orla, and there's also Vivine, who is the UK lead for this topic, who's doing not one, but four events. So kudos to her. We will be doing today's session, and we're really looking forward to everyone's participation, whether you're in the room or online. So some housekeeping rules for those people joining remotely. Make sure, as I said, you're on mute and your cameras are off. Please do use the chat function. If you have any question, there will be an opportunity towards the end and some feedback, so raise your hand. Resources for the session will be posted in the chat for those joining remotely. And for those of you in the room, you will have this resource in front of you. And there's also a second one, which is a scenario sheet that we'll be using later on. We will be using breakout rooms online, and in the room, you will be working with the people around you. The session is recorded, and people in the room, there will be professional photography taking place. I can see the photographers arrived. And there should be live event captioning for those of you joining online. Now, just one thing to bear in mind, and I've put a quick disclaimer on here. You can see the main part towards that is when we come to the scenarios, they are used for the purposes of the learning, and we do not endorse the scenarios that you see in front of you, but it's for the purposes of today because you'll see it'll be quite an interactive session. So without further ado, let's make a start. So in terms of today's learning objectives, by the end of the session, you all, most of you that have come here, you're clearly engaged in the subject, or if you're joining online, you will be able to define what we mean by allyship, then be able to explain why it is important, not just for yourselves, but for organizations, but also more widely in society, in our own lives, and then be able to describe what steps can be taken as of today. Some of you might already be doing things, but what steps can really be taken as of today to demonstrate allyship as an individual, but more importantly, as an organization, as we help to build public trust. So what is allyship? So a definition, as you can see, it's the status or role of a person who advocates and actively works for the inclusion of a marginalized or politicized group in all areas of society, not as a member of that group, but as someone who works in solidarity with its struggles and point of view and under its leadership. Now, there is a quote that I got from online from an article that I read by Roxanne Gay in her article on Making Black Lives Matter. So what she said, we need people to stand up and take our problems born of oppression as their own, without remorse or distance. So we need people to do this even when they cannot be fully represented or understood what it's like to be oppressed for their race, ethnicity, gender, ability, class, religion, or other marker of identity. And one of the main things for myself, I think, as she says here, we need people to use common sense to figure out how to participate in social justice and educate ourselves. So the first step, well, might not be the first step for many of you, but you're taking that step today, which is really great. Okay, so being an ally is not always easy, but it's very, very rewarding. Anyone has the potential to be an ally, and I think if we all just have a think in some time in our lives, we've all had to, rely on someone to speak for us when we haven't been able to speak for ourselves. And I know that's true for my own personal circumstances, and I'm sure others would be able to relate. It means advocating, as we said in the description, for members of social groups outside of your own. And you don't necessarily self-identify as coming from a particular community. but it's someone that you stand next to or behind that group, never in front, as a supporter, a champion, a mentor, and in whatever capacity you're able to do so. And I really hope that's something you can take out today, that, you know, and as well, true allies demonstrate their allyship when no one's around or there's no one else that's watching. And that's really, really important. So why are allies important? So for this part, I will bring on to Orla, who will talk a bit about why are allies important. I'll pass that to you.
Hello, everyone. So, being an ally. Being an ally means advocating for members of social groups outside your own, specifically those that face discrimination daily. Allies typically belong to a more widely represented group, but work to help others facing different challenges to succeed in various ways. An ally might not self-identify as coming from a particular community or group, but they identify as someone who stands next to or behind the community, but never in front, as a friend, supporter, champion, supporter. Anyone has the potential to be an ally. Being an ally can be challenging, but very rewarding. It's all about making people feel included and wanting to belong and be with those groups of people. Has it gone back again?
I think you're holding it upside down.
Okay.
I'll do it. This, you have to press this one.
Okay.
Yeah, it will go to the next.
So everyone needs an ally at some point in their lives to speak up when they cannot speak for themselves. Allies recognise that they are not a member of a community. They can make efforts to understand the struggle every single day, a very powerful voice alongside those that may be oppressed, and being inclusive and building trust. You want to have that environment that everyone feels that they're comfortable and that they're included in every aspect of their working or community life. So, everyone needs an ally at some point in their life to speak up when they cannot speak for themselves. Allies recognise that though they are not a member of a community, they can make efforts to better understand the struggle every single day. A powerful voice alongside oppressed ones, being inclusive and building trust. So an example of how you can build trust and being inclusive is the little yellow scenario at the bottom, which I'll read out for those that maybe aren't watching the slides. A new member has joined your team and there is a whole team meeting. They have tried to talk on several occasions, but have always been interrupted or talked over. This has not really been picked up by any member of this group. At a certain point, you realise that this is going on and not comfortable with it, so you start to talk and make a subtle point of involving your new team member to talk and express their view. So that is an example which I think a lot of people can resonate with, where they're at either a team meeting or a meeting where you can proactively take accountability yourself and make that happen. So hopefully that's something that you can relate to. So now I'm going to go on to Richard, who's going to talk next.
Cool, thank you. Thanks. So we wanted to kind of share a couple of practical techniques with the group and those online as well. And just quickly, again, reinforcing why sort of allies are important. I'll just kind of bring up the slides so you can sort of see. I think we all kind of know, oversensitive. We all know why allyship is important. You're obviously here today, you're dialing in online, but just to highlight the role that allies can play more specifically. And of course, in lots of different contexts. So in some cases, you might have majority privilege that you can leverage. In others, you might be a minority in one way, but you can then support someone who's another minority in a different way. And so how that kind of dynamic plays out, I think, is really important and interesting. So 2 techniques, and one that we use in Marsh McLennan, quick plug, that's where I work. It was always an opportunity, but is the ally continuum. And actually, I've Googled ally continuum, and there's a couple of options out there. There's our one, and also a continuum, which is where are you on that journey? So where do you go from like not really knowing about the topic to gradually sort of learning, educating, and being more of an active ally. So there's different sort of ally continuums as well. But the one I wanted to kind of share with you today goes through a process. And when you think about allyship, remember ally. So it's quite a useful technique, I think. So A-L-L-Y. The first one is acknowledge. And so this is a stage, again, we're thinking about when we're learning, acknowledge there's an issue. Yeah, and you might have heard sort of language around gaslighting, where individuals go, is it that bad? Yeah, or like, are you sure? Or like, no one follows you around the store. I'm sure they wouldn't do that. Yeah, or someone says to me and my husband, no, of course you can hold his hand, walking around London. It's London. And it's like, not always. Yeah, but even though it might be well-intentioned, the fact that the individual clearly has no experience or concept of how you're treated, how you're feeling. Yeah, so I think the important point is to really acknowledge, recognize what the issue is, rather than kind of questioning or kind of going like, really, is it? Like start from a place of kind of appreciative inquiry. Second one, the L. You'll probably see the other L and Y will kind of happen shortly. But of course is learn. And I do think often this is the point in the journey people focus in on, where they might sort of say, I'll read a book or an article, or I'll watch the unconscious bias e-learning at work. Yeah, like, so I'm done. Yeah, I've done it, I've learned something, I read something, I downloaded a book or whatever else it might be. And I think we get stuck at that level. Yeah, so we kind of go, yeah, I'm learning, I'm still learning. Yeah, but like once you've learned a term or terminology, or you sort of, you've engaged with someone, I think, what do you do going forward from there? I would say an important kind of caveat here as well is to make sure that you are learning for yourself, that you're not expecting people to educate you. Yeah, so again, kind of talk to me about it, tell me about it. It's your job to educate me. That is not true allyship. Yeah, and I think that's an important point to kind of highlight as well. Next one is level up. And this is where I mentioned, okay, once you've kind of educated yourself, you've learned, you're going, gosh, that's terrible. I never knew that was happening, or why is that happening? You might get really infuriated by it. Okay, well, where do you put that energy? Yeah, so what do you do to actually address the issue, to level up the inequity? So if we use the analogy of an uneven sort of playing field, we talk about that quite often. Are you going around filling in the potholes? Yeah, what are you doing to try and address those issues? And taking it on yourself, as the kind of team mentioned, working alongside, supporting, not then stepping out in front and engaging in performative allyship either. So again, we might talk about those in the breakouts and the kind of the subtle balance that we need to have in this area. And also if we need to challenge microaggressions, or actually to challenge inappropriate language and behavior, and we'll come on to a D's technique we can use for that as well. And then as with any kind of technique or acronym, they don't always work perfectly. So you could see me at my desk, kind of going like, all right, what is Y going to be? What is Y going to be? And actually, Y is Y. So why did you do what you did? Yeah, why did you learn? Why did you read? Because often we kind of go like, okay, I'll do this. I'm an ally. Okay, has anything changed? Yeah, what's the impact been? Why did you do what you did? Has it had the desired outcome? Otherwise, again, it was performative, it was tokenistic. It made you feel better, but actually did it really do anything? And so I think that's an important stage, especially organizations that have been doing D&I or IND or IDB, whichever acronym we have, but you've been doing diversity for a while, is to stop and pause and reflect and go, is it really delivering the outcomes we're looking for? Or are you just doing much the same? And I think that applies for individual allyship as well as organizational allyship. And if it didn't have the desired effect, then the continuum kind of analogy is you go back to the beginning and acknowledge, do some more research, learn again, take a different action. Did that have the desired impact? And then go through the continuum. Or the corkscrew, I think, is a better analogy, but I couldn't find a very good corkscrew image to use. So if you want to use this and adapt this in your organizations, please do. But I would say find a nice fancy corkscrew analogy that you can use as well. And happy for questions after this, but I want to kind of stick to time. Another practical technique alongside sort of thinking ALLY is also to demonstrate allyship using 5 Ds. I think there's 5 in there. And I'll bring them up sort of very briefly because I'm probably at time. So if you do witness something, you can be direct. Important caveats for this technique is thinking about power dynamics and personal safety. Yeah, so in some situations, you may not feel safe. You might not want to challenge upwards. There might be other ramifications. Or in certain contexts, you might not be safe to challenge an individual in that way. Yeah, so again, making sure that if you can be direct, you can kind of call out there and then. Of course, you can kind of delegate. So are there others you can bring along on the journey? You know, those that may be able to kind of sort of step in and call things out in a different way. I often find, and I've worked in D&I for about 15 years now, is that I can leverage my white male privilege to talk about racial inequity in a different way to my colleagues of color. And so I can say something that could be actually very direct and very challenging, but people won't respond to me in the same way they'll respond to others. And again, it could be because they feel it's not my personal issue and I'm not going to personally benefit. When actually we all benefit from tackling racial inequity. But I've seen that reaction play out very, very differently. So like, you know, male feminism gets a much better rap in the media than feminism does for some strange reason. So other kind of examples, so distract. And this even, I think, sort of links into what do you do with regards to conflict? What are your techniques? Do you just deflect? Do you distract? Do you kind of remove someone from the situation? Again, I think these are some of the options you can kind of work through as well. Delay, so check in later, thinking, right, well, we're not going to deal with it right now, but do you sort of make a note, follow up with HR? I'm sure most of us have ethic lines that we can call on or work with our employee resource groups. So thinking, you know, what are the avenues that I can take rather than going, oh, that was a bit awkward, not sure what to do. There's lots of different routes we can take. And then the fifth, again, is make note. You know, again, thinking, what is the evidence for this? And I mentioned the kind of term gaslighting, you know, is where it might kind of go like, okay, it was just a one-off, or, you know, they didn't mean it, or are you sure? You know, and all these sort of things that can kind of play out. Whereas to really move forward on culture change, we have to call out these issues and have to realize these are problems that we're experiencing in our organizations. But realizing as an individual, again, what are the techniques you can use that are safer and more effective in that particular situation? So two very practical techniques, the Ally Continuum, and you can also use the ALLY as an effective challenge tool. So I acknowledge what you've just said. I'm listening to what you're sort of saying. I'm trying to learn your perspective. This is the action we're going to take, and then what's the outcome going to be? Yeah, so you can also use the Ally piece as an effective challenge technique as well. Perfect. So a couple of techniques, and we're obviously going to go through a few of those in the scenarios as well. How about you?
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Richard. So we're now going to look at some scenarios, and this will be the practical part where whether you're online or in the room, you'll be working with the people around you. If you are in the room, you will see a sheet that looks like this. There are 4 scenarios on them. It's just under the resource that's called Dive In. Online, it will be posted into the chat. There are 4 different scenarios. Each scenario has a question saying, what do you do? So remote attendees, once I finish the explanation, you will be assigned a breakout room. In person, as I said, you'll be working with the people around you. So to my left, so your right, you'll be this side of the room, you'll be looking at scenarios 1 and 2. And to my right, so on the left-hand side of the room, you'll be looking at scenarios 3 and 4. Online, there's going to be around 50 breakout rooms. So breakout rooms 1 to 25 will look at scenarios 1 and 2. And breakout rooms 26 to 50 will be looking at scenarios 3 and 4. Now, the room number will be displayed when you put into the breakout room. We will like you to nominate one person who potentially speak. We probably won't have time for everyone to speak, but it will be good to get some views and discussion on each of the scenarios. We will have around 20 to 25 minutes for you to have that conversation. Please make introductions really short and snappy with the people around you. Maybe you know some of the people, maybe you don't. So don't spend too much time on that. Let's make sure, especially online, that everyone gets an opportunity to speak. So if you can, please turn on your cameras and your microphones. And as we said, we're using the Ally Continuum that Richard talked about, as well as the 5 Ds for bystander intervention. And again, as I said at the start of the room, these scenarios we've been created by ourselves with input from various stakeholders. And obviously, we don't endorse what's in this. It's just for the learning only. So without further ado, people in the room, you can make a start with the people around you. We're going to have 20 minutes, so at 10 to, we will stop and start to get feedback. And for those of you online, just bear with us a second, and we will put you into breakout rooms. So people in the room, you can talk amongst yourselves, and we will come around. With?
I'm trying to access it.
With what? So for those of you online, there is an issue with the scenarios downloading, so we will paste the scenarios into the chat. As I said, groups 1 to 25, scenario 1 and 2, and groups 26 to 50, scenarios 3 and 4. Okay, thank you for... Yeah. Okay, I think we are going to wrap up the breakout, hopefully online. We did get you into some breakout rooms. There's a few people dialing in and dialing out. Do not worry, after this session, we will send around the resource to everyone joining online that you could also take away with you and to your companies and have a look at the scenarios as well as the Ally continuum that we have. It's also been posted into the chat, so you'll be able to see. So we're now going to look at your feedback, getting some questions. We're getting some feedback on the 4 scenarios that everyone should have had a chance in whichever group you're in to look at. So if you're online, please raise your hand and you'll be able to speak. And equally in the room, if you want to speak, please signal and we'll pass around the roaming mic. Just say your name, who you work for, and what you would like to say. So we're going to start with scenario 1. So I will read it out for the benefit of anyone who didn't get to see the scenarios. Hopefully you all got to see them. So you are part of an interview panel, and when discussing the best performers, your colleague says that she thinks the female candidate will need to be more confident to fit in with the team. What do you do? And as I said at the start, for anyone that might be joining now, we do not endorse these scenarios. These are just for the purpose of the learning. So I'll call up Orla and Richard as well for the feedback part. We'll hear your feedback, what you would do in that situation. I think to my left, we gave you scenarios 1 and 2. Is there anyone that want to speak, or anyone online would like to put their hand up and say, yeah, we will put the mic around. Anyone like to kick off? Be brave, yeah. Be brave, yeah, brave. Okay, there's someone. Okay.
I'll be
so
the
if you just like to say, yeah, if you just say your name and where you're from.
Thank you. I'm Declan, and I work at Lloyd's. We discussed this scenario and even had similar examples that we've actually been a part of in our work. I think the main thing that we said we would at least start off with is to the interview panel, and the person maybe who's made that comment is start questioning it or trying to get behind it a bit more. I think, and even questioning what's meant by that to begin with. I think sometimes we can take things as a given and maybe accept that the female candidate is less confident, but I think exploring, well, what do they mean by that, and why do they think the female candidate is less confident, and why even they feel that confidence is necessary in this particular part of the team, or what's needed and what to do. And I think really trying to get to the bottom of that, and then maybe from that we could explore some of the discussion more and kind of talk around those biases. Anything else? No.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone online, you can post into the chat and we will read out if there's anything. Yeah. Would you like to talk? Yeah, if Daniel, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can come on the camera. We'll see you in the room and we'll wave. Oh, wave. The floor is yours.
Sorry guys, I'm in the office right now. what we asked about is we asked the similar questions of why, but it's also brought the question of what's the culture in the company like, that's something that came out of that interview that you think she needs to be more confident. And one of the other points is that this is a female interviewer asking this question as well. So what has she had to deal with that she feels that the lack of confidence means that this other female won't be able to progress in the role that she's applied for? So those are the talking points that we took away from this.
Anything from the panel for us to add? Anyone has?
I think the only kind of challenge with a concept like confidence is how do you quantify that? So it's fundamentally, remove maybe the D&I piece around it, because again, confidence can be kind of male coded, Western coded. But how do you measure that? Yeah, so actually it's basically bad feedback. But I think echoing kind of Danielle's point and also what Declan mentioned is that how helpful is that for the team and what's kind of going on with the culture? And how do we sort of unpick that? But I think, yeah, it's the quantifying of confidence, because we'll all talk about it. Executive presence. What does that mean? Who knows? And it's going to be very kind of coded to disadvantage different groups. Oh, cool. Question, yeah.
I mean, just on confidence, we also discussed that it depends on what setting she needs to be confident in, right? So if in her role, 95% of the time she's doing, say like we were talking about my children's school, the headmistress deals with the students and she's amazing with the students, right? But in the 5% of the time, she has a whole room full of parents. She's not the most, wonderful speaker, but then you've got to think about what do you want her to achieve, and is impressing the parents the most important part of a job, or making sure the children has the highest quality education?
Thank you.
That's a really good point. And also with regarding the scenario and the choice of words that was given, it could be a development opportunity that could be added onto the person joining the organisation, and a plan that could be put in place. Is it a showstopper? So there are steps that can be done to make that a success going forward.
I think I would delve a bit into it following the interview, like perhaps the direct or delay to understand like why the female colleague actually having those thoughts and views, and actually a bit challenging, obviously depending on the power balance and how the relation between the two. But I think I would like to think I'd be direct, but that's not always possible. So at that moment maybe not, but maybe later would be a discussion to have.
Yeah, I agree, George. It shouldn't be a showstopper though, given that scenario.
Yeah. Is there anything else online? Anyone else? Yes, Michelle. Hello.
Wherever you are. I am Michelle from Gallagher Insurance Brokers, and we were in team 13 with Shalondovs, with 3 Carol from AXA, Jim from WTW. And I just wanted to share that for scenario 1, we looked at assigning some of those acronyms and the 5 Ds, and we believe that as a colleague, we should be acknowledging that there may be some bias by, with the colleague that in bringing forth or saying that the colleague or the person does not have sufficient confidence. If you're bringing someone into a team, each person in the team brings a certain strength. And that is what a team is all about. And confidence may not necessarily be, a detractor from being employed. You have other skill sets that would, of course, fit into your team dynamic, that would, of course, make a successful team. Leveling up too, using this as an opportunity to, address what may be the elephant in the room, So those are some of the ALI acronyms that we've assigned to this scenario, and being direct on the 5 Ds, being very direct. This is the opportunity to do so, where you have an interviewing panel that comes forward and, this is the time to be direct and say, hey, let's address why you feel that our colleague is not confident enough, and explore that avenue. So those are some of our thoughts on the scenario 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. If there's anything else to be added, I think we'll go on to scenario 2. Oh. Yeah, Ogden. Hi, Ogden. We actually know Ogden, I think. Yeah, it is. Hi, Ogden. think you're on mute.
I'm going to not mute. Okay. Yeah, just a quick one. Am I there? Can you see me? I'm not
Hi,
sure
we can see you loud and clear.
what's going on. Yeah, just a quick thing that we picked up on was, and it's something that Richard mentioned, was around the culture. So, this interview is with high performers. So she's already got there on merit as a high performer. So what's needed with the confidence? What's going on with the culture of the team, that it's thought that she needs to be confident to join the team? So is the problem with the team rather than with the individual, because she's already a high performer anyway? And the other thing we picked up was with it being a woman saying this, and if it was a man saying it, would it have been perceived in a different way? But also there's that expectation that because it's a female, you'd expect the woman to automatically be an ally. She's got to where she is and to bring other women along with her. So there was a lot to unpick in it that we saw with that comment, and who was saying it, and the why.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So we will move on to no one else on. No, great. Thank you for all your interactions online. So we're going to look at scenario 2. So you overhear colleagues discussing a diversity session that was recently run, and one of them says, diversity has gone too far and it must be great being a black woman at work these days. What do you do?
I think one of the things we wanted to kind of share was that these are not made up scenarios. So even amongst the kind of working group, these are all things that we've either supported colleagues or we've sort of dealt with cases. So unfortunately, these are real things that are being said and our colleagues are hearing. And I think, how do we sort of challenge what is felt to be someone asserting what they feel must be a reality? You know, again, we kind of talked about acknowledging and understanding what's the experience for individuals. And I guess, you know, using the kind of techniques, how do we kind of challenge and call that out whilst making sure the individual feels they can share their opinion, but that the opinion is in line with the organizational values and that the words they use still have impact. Because otherwise, sometimes the conversation is like, oh, you can't say anything these days, and it's PC gone mad, and you know, I can't be open and share my opinion. And it's like, well, you can do that in the wider world, but in this organization, we have standards and we want to create an inclusive culture. And the way of kind of asserting things is not going to support that. So I think it's just important to kind of highlight, these are real scenarios, unfortunately, but making sure we also help people to be open, but within the kind of the confines of an inclusive culture, really. But any kind of thoughts from the group for conversations? Yeah. It's all right.
We had an interesting conversation about the context that this happened in. If you were kind of alone with someone, you might feel you can be more direct and you know, maybe open up a conversation about, you know, what's behind that? Why do you feel like that? And kind of, rather than shutting them down as such, kind of, you know, have a conversation and, you know, bring about opportunities to bring forth different perspectives. But one of the dynamics we thought would be like, who else is around? And if you have black colleagues around, what might they want from you in that scenario? And that not always being the same thing. Some people might find it quite traumatizing to hear a debate about this and want it just shut down. Some people might want more direct support. So we spoke about, there are a lot of dynamics at play, and it can be quite challenging to figure out what's the best thing to do for the people in the room.
Sure, definitely. And what was your name again? Sorry. Linda.
Linda.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think context is such a key piece, and that's a really important one that you kind of mentioned. And also, are there other individuals that are looking to you, but even reading the room and understanding, you know, do they want to have this conversation? Yeah, and you know, I've spoken to a huge diversity of colleagues, but also our black colleagues, you know, on following up from the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, where they actually had to, for their own well-being, take a step back, you know, and go, I just can't have this conversation again and again and again, you know, and myself as a gay man, you know, when you go to parties and people kind of go like, oh, and then start talking to you about, you know, a whole range of things, and I won't go into them now, but you just go, yes, okay, you know, this is my evening now, or you go, I'm just going to go over here because I just haven't got, you know, the intellectual capacity to do that right now. And of course, that can play out for lots of different groups in lots of different ways, but I think context is really key.
Yeah, I think one of the 5 Ds of bystander was the delay. And I've been in a meeting where there's been a lot of people and I've heard something that has made me really feel uncomfortable on behalf of someone else. I don't know what the person would have felt like. And in that moment, there was no way I could put my hand up or say, well, that's unacceptable. So it was kind of after that, I went and saw that person and said, what I heard was really not okay. It's not what I stand for, regardless of. So that's why everyone has their part in allyship to actually shape the future. Hopefully, if everyone becomes an ally, is the collective. So yeah, that was a delay tactic that unfortunately can't always speak up.
And I think, George, it's important that all of us are open to people talking to us about how they would like things to improve as well, and being open to the feedback, because we're all human, and people can make errors or say something unintentionally, but if you're open to it, then everything can improve.
Yeah, I think we had some comments in the chat. Yeah. So should we just give her the mic, or?
Oh, it's a good
question. If you could just read the comments in the chat.
Oh, written comments.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
The comment from Nicola Perry was, be direct, call it out if you feel you're able to do so. If you aren't comfortable, document it and talk to someone such as HR. It was also mentioned, find out what in the training made the person feel this way and how you can restart the ally continuum.
Very good. Ally continuum reference. Amazing. So we'll move on. Is there anyone else? Okay. Ogden, would you like to speak?
Sorry, it's me again. I think
that's
this
fine.
Probably goes across quite a lot of what we're talking about. So one of the things that I brought up was this culture is invisible to those who thrive in it. So where there may be initiatives going on that will bring things in line for, speaking as a Black woman, bring things in line that we will get the same as everyone else, then because that's visible, because it's being brought in line with everyone else, and someone's got, people may have something to say about it. So it's good that people are able to speak, but as Richard said, it's how it's being said. But also we need to make sure that we bring everyone along so that you're not getting these comments. So if you are bringing in initiatives, then the reasons behind it and why, and to make sure, and someone else brought up the word privilege in our conversations. And so those people who, the culture is invisible to, they are privileged. And so everything else that's going on is bringing in line so that, me as a Black woman would be privileged too. So it's that conversation. So it could be around the training, it could be around the messaging. So, talking to HR, talking to the other people, seeing what the other people in the meeting were saying, because if they've said anything back. So, it's just taking on board what everyone says and feels, and to not leave anyone behind, to make sure everyone's brought forward, and then you'll get more of traction and adoption.
Thank you. Any more for any more? Okay.
Actually, sorry, someone has their hand up. Shalonda King.
Shalonda, hello. No, I'm talking to this. Shalonda?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I would also say that that we should know ourselves as well, know your trigger. And when when something like this is brought up, to know that, maybe you need to walk away. So your reaction, is it a negative reaction to that comment? So, being a Black woman, to walk and hear that, and I think the reaction could be a very startled one and could go very left. So I just think knowing yourself and being able to say, I'm going to remove myself, gather my thoughts. And I think I said in our group to do a woosah, to say, I'm not going to be able to respond respectfully. Let me walk away and then come back.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to the next one so we can keep in line with time. So scenario 3, a client has a visual disability and has asked for meeting notes or pre-read materials to be shared in advance of a meeting. You've noticed that this hasn't happened on a couple of occasions recently. what do you do? Anyone would like? Hi, if you could say your name and where you're from, thank you.
I am Joanna from Amtrust. So we had some really good conversations. This one was quite a short one for us because we felt that there's a lot of examples where you can be quite direct, and this felt like one that people are probably not doing it from a malicious place. They're just, so I use myself as an example because sometimes my organisation is terrible, and things like visual impairment, you may not necessarily, it might not come to the front of your mind that actually that's why you're doing it. So it would be a direct reminder to the group, guys, we've got somebody this is impacting. Can you make sure that these are coming out when they are? But also you could have that conversation with the person with the visual impairment to ask how they would feel about talking to the group, about how it impacts them, both from a positive and a negative perspective. So by not having it, what are the implications of that? And I think Paul, who's gone, said that, for him, it was about, just reminding everybody, because if somebody's good enough to be at a meeting, then you want them to fully participate. And if they don't get the stuff ahead of time, they're not going to get the opportunity to fully participate. And therefore, you're not going to get the best from that individual. So we felt like in that circumstance, being direct, you're not going to cause any offence to anyone or cause any sort of dilemma.
I think Vivine had something to say. Yeah. Would you like to be on camera? Okay, here you are. Give the opportunity.
I think people see and hear enough of me as it is. So Vivine Cameron, CII, EDI manager. This is a good point to point out the CII professional standards. You have a duty, if you have a client, not to discriminate or to ensure that they are serviced to the highest possible standard. So if you have a client that makes a specific request pertaining to something that is a disability challenge for them, then you're not really adhering to the code if you don't actually fulfill that requirement that they have as a client. So we've got to think about the wider context of the market. And I'd be remiss if I didn't sit here as a CI employee and point out the professional standards. That's the code we work to. And we can be held to account. And as a professional body, building public trust, the public is our client. So if you have a client that's a minority group that needs something that asks for it, then you need to think about that in the context of your business.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, anything in the chat? Anyone's got their hand up? Yep, so we've got comments in the chat. Here we are.
First comment is to talk to the meeting organizer. Another comment is, scenario 3 feels fairly easy. Send them on yourself and or remind people they need to be sent in advance or the meeting needs to be rearranged. Also, DDA says you have to make reasonable adaptations to support people with a disability. So similar to Vivine's comment,
Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to the final one. This is a slightly longer one. So during an informal chat at the water cooler with other colleagues, colleague A, as part of banter, says some derogatory and unfounded comments about the LGBT+ community. You are aware that other people present are part of that community and who could potentially feel very uncomfortable with this comment. What would you do? Anyone want to make a start? Okay. Can I just take that? If you could just say your name and where you're from. Thank you.
Hi, Matt Terry from Marsh. I think we kind of felt there were two directions you can go depending on the group setting you're in. You can be direct if you feel like you know the people well enough, and particularly perhaps the person who you feel may be particularly offended by this subject. You can call it out if you feel like that's going to be okay without creating conflict. But I think one of the biggest sort of learning points around allyship that I've had recently is about the ability to use the scenario you were talking about around delaying and actually, not hiding behind not wanting to create a conflict as a reason to do nothing, because actually by actively supporting that person in another way and vocalizing your support for that person after the event, I think you can still have a meaningful impact, and asking them if they would like you to act on their behalf or support them in an action or take it further in some way. So I think, naturally I sort of felt like that delay tactic felt the most appropriate here, but there are scenarios where actually sometimes it's a little easier if it's kind of on a WhatsApp group or over email, and you can just cut it, just say like, not good, not appropriate. I think we can stop that. If you know the people well enough, you can be direct, but I think the delay felt a more likely scenario in this one.
Anyone else? Anyone on the chat? Oh, there's someone. Oh, I can take it. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah, we can pass it around. Here we are. Thank you. If you just say your name and where.
Maria from Willis Towers Watson. I think we kind of, as a group, thought the opposite to that. That if you're at a water cooler and somebody says something like that, be brave and say that's not appropriate, and put them back the spot back on them. So slightly thought the delayed wasn't the right action in that situation. There's no right or wrong. No. But that was our.
Any action is better than inaction. So. Yes. And it's a braver culture. So you brought it in line with the dive in.
Yes, that's what we thought. Be brave and just on the spot. So that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
And I think it can, depend on who is at the water cooler, how you feel comfortable being brave, but adopting the delay or the action, you've got to do what you feel comfortable with. By not doing anything doesn't help. So.
But sometimes it might feel awkward to say something and you don't say anything and then you just push it aside even though you don't agree with it. And it does go back to what a lot of people mentioned about culture. I know Ogden talked about it, about the culture of the organisation, what it's like to speak up or talk out.
So I'm Natalie. I'm from Aviva. Again, so I suppose just reflect on the way that you challenge people. And I think the personal sort of takeaway where I've heard it go particularly well is where you sort of say, actually, that made me feel really uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that, you're from that same community, but just rather than saying you're wrong, but just actually that made me feel a bit uncomfortable. It can be kind of a nice, a softer way of challenging. But I think on this particular example, because there were people from the community there, I think that's why we were focusing more on actually you probably do need to challenge. Whereas if maybe there aren't, you don't always know, but it can be more of actually I'm going to take it away and talk to them.
Yeah. Is there anything on the chat or any hands? No? Anyone else have anything to add?
I think there's also, with the context piece, I think is that sort of, I think someone else mentioned it about, know yourself and know your own triggers. But I also think as an ally is to know how you will play out in that scenario. And so I think there's sometimes a feeling of like, right, I'm an ally and I'm going to be listening out for anything in the office and like, I'm ready for it. I'm going to jump in and I'm going to save somebody, and actually we're designing in the team a package at the moment about unmasking and the fact that we all mask in the workplace in some ways, but using the kind of superhero piece to feed into allyship, because it's not an expectation that you're going to rescue minorities. Yeah, it's not that you have to jump in. And also we want to also bring in that kind of majority male population, especially amongst leadership, where we're expecting you to sort of stand up and be brave and to kind of call out, but not in this idea that you're going to talk on behalf of, or you're going to kind of cover other people. So I think even your own individual, how you would play out in that scenario is really important, where sometimes female privilege means you can call things out in a way that will de-escalate. But actually, if you're a man coming in as a kind of, right, I'm going to save you, that could actually escalate the situation. So I think even how you play out in that dynamic is also quite important as well.
Right. Anyone else? No? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for your feedback and all the conversations that we've heard. So in terms of today's learning outcomes, so hopefully you're all able now to define what allyship is. If you can't, it is on here for you. Hopefully take this away. There are a few spares in the room. And for those of you online, if you haven't received it, we will get to you. Do not worry, it's in the chat. It's now in the chat. It was as well before. You'll be able to explain why it's important, not just for yourself, but for your organisation. And then finally, we've seen the steps that you can take to demonstrate allyship at individual level, but also as a organisational level. So the ally continuum and the 5Ds bystander intervention. So before we close, as with anything, there is a feedback. But before we get to that, on the reverse side of your resource, there is the commitment page, which is asking you what three things you would do differently, how will you use the learning, and also what you are inspired to. So what you're inspired to do following today's session. And if you're able to provide us with some feedback, so you can scan. So those of you joining remotely, you can scan this on your phone. For those of you here, you can also scan it on the scenario sheet. There is a QR code on your scenario sheet, so you can scan that. Yeah, did we have a question from online? No, if we could just, those of you online, if you could just mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. We are hoping through the feedback to reach out to you in the next 6 weeks or so with some more scenarios and to follow up to see what actions you have taken. There is a website, so Guide to Allyship, and there is also
put my mic on.